I had spent weeks preparing, weeks carefully arranging every detail of the celebration for my son's promotion, the one I had promised to honor in style. I booked the finest caterers I could afford, the ones with delicate platters that made every bite feel like an indulgence. I even hired a florist to fill the room with white lilies, his favorite, knowing that the fragrance alone would bring a smile to his face. I imagined the laughter, the stories, the pride in his eyes as he stood among family and friends. Everything was ready, and yet, before I even had a chance to taste the sweetness of that moment, it was stolen from me. It came in a text, short, dismissive, cold. "You won't be joining us. My wife prefers to keep it only family." At first, I stared at the screen in disbelief, thinking perhaps I had misread it. I reread it, and again, every word felt like a punch to the gut. My son, my boy, the one I had carried through scraped knees, sleepless nights, and first heartbreaks, was telling me I wasn't welcome. Not because of anything I had done, but because the woman he married didn't want me there. I sank into my chair, the silence around me deafening. The images of the lavish dinner I had paid for, the hours I had spent planning, suddenly mocked me. My mind raced through memories, my son as a child, laughing as I held him high on my shoulders, calling out to me as if the world itself belonged to us. The sacrifices I had made, the nights I worked until my hands ached just to put food on the table, to ensure he had every opportunity I never did they mean nothing? A hollow ache settled in my chest. I could almost hear the whispers of the guests I had invited, the chatter that would fill the room without me. My absence was not just noticed, it was deliberate. I had envisioned standing next to him, offering congratulations, sharing a private glance that spoke volumes about our bond. But instead, I would be nothing but a ghost in a room I had helped fill with warmth and light. I drove to the venue anyway. Perhaps part of me hoped it was a mistake, a cruel oversight that could be fixed with a plea. But the moment I arrived, the truth revealed itself. There were empty seats, a place set where I would have been, and everywhere else, laughter and celebration continued without me. I was a shadow walking among strangers who smiled politely, aware of my absence, but unwilling to acknowledge it fully. I busied myself with the logistics, helping the caterers, adjusting the flower arrangements, ensuring everything ran smoothly. My son never approached me. My wife, though sympathetic in her own quiet way, offered no words of comfort in front of the crowd, only a fleeting glance that seemed to plead for me to keep my dignity. And so I did. I smiled when necessary, nodded politely, and made small talk with people who had no idea of the storm inside me. And yet, under the forced calm, a quiet fury began to simmer. The humiliation I felt was sharp, but it did not break me. It forged something deeper, a resolve that this would not go unanswered, not with anger, not with confrontation, but with something far more potent, a reclamation of respect, dignity, and presence. As I stood there, arranging the chairs and straightening the tablecloths, I realized the truth. I had been invisible, yes, but invisibility is deceptive. It gives one time to grow, to prepare, to plan. And if they thought they could erase me from this moment, they had only sown the seeds of their own regret. By the end of the evening, the laughter faded, the guests departed, and I drove home alone, my hands trembling not from sadness, but from the fire igniting inside me. One day, they would understand that a father's love is patient, but betrayal carries a cost, and I would make sure that cost was unforgettable. After that night, I didn't speak to my son. Not immediately. I couldn't. Every attempt to form a sentence ended in a bitter lump lodged in my throat. I replayed the text over and over, each time dissecting it, searching for some hidden meaning, some reason I could accept. But there was none. It wasn't about me, it wasn't about anything I had done wrong. It was simply about exclusion, about a family redefining itself without me. I found myself wandering through the house in silence, passing the photographs on the wall. His first steps, his 5th birthday, the school play where I had proudly clutched the camera to capture. Every moment, each photo was a relic, a reminder of a love I had invested in unquestioningly, yet one that had now been dismissed with a few cold words on a glowing screen. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining the party without me. I pictured him laughing, telling stories, raising a glass without ever glancing my way. The thought gnawed at me, but beneath the pain, something else began to grow, a quiet, smoldering fire. It was not hatred in the reckless sense, but a resolve sharpened by betrayal. If they thought they could diminish me with exclusion, they were gravely mistaken. I began cataloging every memory, every sacrifice I had made for this family. Late nights working extra shifts, skipped meals to make sure there was enough for him, silent endurance of disappointments so he could chase his dreams. I listed them all, not to boast, but to remind myself of my worth. For too long, I had measured my value by their acceptance, by their gratitude, and now I realized my value existed independently of them. With that realization came clarity. If I was to regain my dignity, I needed a plan, not a plan of vengeance born of anger, but one forged in patience, intelligence, and precision. I didn't want destruction, I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to see unmistakably that I was not invisible, that my presence could not be ignored or erased. And most importantly, I wanted to reclaim the pride I had lost in that single text. I began in small ways. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted from, the ones who had once admired my determination and generosity. I revisited projects I had abandoned for the sake of family obligations. Painting, writing, even a community initiative I had shelved years ago. All these became avenues for rebuilding a life that existed beyond the approval of my son or daughter-in-law. And yet, every step forward carried a shadow of bittersweet reflection. I wasn't doing this just for them to notice. I was doing it for myself, but I imagined the day they would. I imagined their surprise, the subtle shock when they realized the man they dismissed was thriving, independent, and respected. I imagined the quiet sting in my son's eyes when he finally understood the depth of my patience, the magnitude of my love, and the brilliance of the life I had built despite their attempts to marginalize me. Even as I plotted my quiet reclamation, I felt sorrow too. There was grief for the relationship I had lost, for the dinners I would never share, the laughter I would never hear. But grief, I realized, was a fuel, not a chain. It could power my ascent without consuming me. By the end of the week, I had transformed my living room into a war room of sorts, a place of reflection, planning, and careful strategy. I wrote down goals, small victories I could achieve, ways to grow stronger and more visible. Each night, I sat there in silence, letting the pain of exclusion sharpen my resolve rather than dull it. And in the quiet hours, when the world slept and the sting of betrayal echoed most loudly, I whispered to myself a promise: they will see. One day they will see, and when they do, it will not be in anger. It will be in the undeniable light of my success, my dignity, my unshakable presence. The seed of revenge was planted, small and tender, but it had taken root in fertile soil, the soil of betrayal, heartbreak, and a father's unwavering love that refused to be ignored. Fire that had been quietly smoldering in me began to burn brighter. It was no longer just anger, no longer just the sting of exclusion. It had transformed into a kind of purposeful energy. I realized that revenge need not be loud, cruel, or impulsive. True revenge was subtle. It was living fully, thriving, and forcing those who had dismissed me to witness it. Not out of malice, but because my life could not be ignored. I started small. I reached out to friends I had lost touch with over the years, the ones who had always appreciated me, even when family obligations had pulled me away. I rekindled those connections, slowly weaving myself back into the lives of people who valued me. Invitations to gatherings I had never attended began arriving. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of belonging and appreciation that was entirely mine. Next, I turned inward, revisiting passions and dreams I had shelved. I dusted off old projects, a painting I had never finished, a book I had been meaning to write, a community initiative I had abandoned for work and family obligations. Each step was a reminder that my worth did not depend on my son's approval. Each accomplishment was a quiet declaration. I am still here, and I am thriving. I also began taking care of myself in ways I had neglected. I joined a local fitness group, improving my health and energy. I dressed with care, not to impress anyone in particular, but because I deserved to feel confident and proud in my own skin. The reflection in the mirror began to show not just a man who had been hurt, but a man growing stronger, sharper, more undeniable. Meanwhile, my son and his wife continued in their bubble, unaware that their slight had set in motion a transformation they could neither prevent nor anticipate. Invitations to events, professional opportunities, and social recognition began to present themselves to me naturally. People who had admired my work and character noticed the renewed energy I carried. I became a presence that could no longer be quietly dismissed, a quiet force moving steadily through life with grace and dignity. And then came the small, deliberate acts of poetic justice. I attended gatherings they weren't invited to, or wouldn't allow me into, and I thrived there. I volunteered for public causes and earned recognition for my contributions. I helped friends and colleagues, quietly demonstrating the generosity and care they had tried to overlook. Each achievement, each moment of visible success was a message. I am here, I am powerful, and I will not be erased. Through it all, I kept my pride in check. I never flaunted my victories directly to them. I didn't need to. True revenge does not need an audience of one to be effective. The knowledge that I had rebuilt myself, that I had taken the sting of rejection and forged it into something magnificent, was enough. And I could almost imagine the sting of recognition in my son's eyes when he finally saw me not as someone who could be ignored, but as someone he had underestimated. The transformation wasn't just external, it was deeply internal. I felt lighter, more grounded, and more confident. I could give without expectation, care without resentment, and smile without fear of being dismissed. The man who had walked into that celebration, humiliated and unseen, had evolved into someone unshakable, someone radiant in his dignity. By the end of the chapter, the foundation of my revenge had been laid, not with anger, but with brilliance. I had become the architect of my own respect, the master of my own destiny, and the day would come when they would see. Not through confrontation, not through argument, but through the undeniable reality of a life fully reclaimed. A father who could not be ignored, and a son who had learned too late that some bonds, once broken, reveal the depth of what they have lost. The day finally came when the quiet work of rebuilding myself, the late nights, the small victories, the relentless pursuit of dignity was ready to reveal its impact. It wasn't a public display orchestrated to humiliate my son or his wife. It was something far more powerful, undeniable proof that I had thrived despite their attempt to erase me. The occasion was a local community gala, an event honoring contributions to the arts and civic life. Months ago, I had casually submitted my work for consideration, a painting I had completed, a project I had nurtured from the ground up, entirely separate from my son's world. I had done it for myself, but fate has a way of rewarding perseverance. When the announcement came that my project had won top recognition, a swell of pride coursed through me. This was more than a trophy. It was validation, the tangible evidence that I had built a life of worth, respect, and admiration. independent of those who had tried to diminish me. I arrived at the gala, dressed sharply, the subtle confidence of someone who knew his own value radiating from every gesture. The room was filled with familiar faces, friends, colleagues, admirers, but also strangers who would soon become part of my growing network. And then, as if guided by fate, I caught sight of them, my son and his wife, seated at a distant table, their expressions carefully neutral yet betraying a flicker of curiosity. I could almost see the calculations running through their minds, the realization that this man they had excluded was not just present. He was celebrated. The ceremony began, and one by one, awards were announced. When my name was called, a polite applause swelled into genuine admiration. I walked to the stage with measured steps, accepting the recognition with grace, holding the certificate and the small sculpture that symbolized my achievement. Cameras flashed, hands shook mine, and congratulations poured in. I looked out over the audience, and for a moment, my eyes met my son's. There it was, the faintest flicker of shock, a quiet sting of recognition. They had underestimated me, and now the world was acknowledging what they had dismissed. I could have stopped there, basked in the moment, and perhaps made them feel the weight of their oversight. But I didn't need to. True vindication does not require cruelty. It is silent, subtle, and absolute. By living fully, embracing my worth, and excelling in the ways that truly mattered, I had delivered a lesson far more profound than any confrontation could provide. After the gala, people came to me, thanking me for my contributions, praising my work, asking about my journey. The warmth I received from genuine admirers was intoxicating, yet the quiet satisfaction of my son's realization lingered beneath it all. I no longer sought his approval, but the recognition that he could no longer dismiss me carried its own satisfaction. Later that night, as I returned home, the city lights reflecting in the rear-view mirror, I allowed myself a rare moment of introspection. Betrayal had cut deeply, leaving scars I will always carry. But in the process of transforming that pain into purpose, I discovered something invaluable: my dignity, my resilience, and the power of living authentically. The rejection that once felt like a dagger had become the very forge that shaped me into someone unstoppable. I understood then that revenge is not measured in spiteful acts, nor in hurt inflicted. Revenge, the kind that lasts, is measured in lives reclaimed, in joy restored, in the quiet certainty that those who try to diminish you will witness your brilliance, without you ever stooping to anger. My son and his wife would remember that night, not because I forced them to, but because the truth of my presence, my worth, and my love could not be erased. As I turned off the lights and settled into bed, a calm smile rested on my lips. The storm of betrayal had passed, leaving behind a landscape richer than I could have imagined. And though some wounds would never fully heal, I had discovered a power far greater than vengeance, the power of unwavering dignity, and the knowledge that no one can ever truly diminish a father's love or the strength it can inspire.